Hello, everyone. Today I want to discuss structural response to an IAL Edexcel Economics paper 1 20 marker. So we know that for the IAL paper 1, we know that the length of the exam is 1 hour 45 minutes. So that's 105 minutes, and you have 8 marks in total. So roughly what that means, if you're going to be responding to a 20 marker, you have about 1.25 minutes per mark. In other words, if you're writing a 20 marker, you should budget 25 minutes in order to complete. And in terms of timings, you have to be really strict with yourself. One of the failures of students repeatedly is that they spend too much time on writing essays, and therefore what you find is that when it comes to the second essay or the later part of the exam, then they run out of time, and then they have to compress their thinking into a short space. All right, so we want to be able to model an approach that is doable within 25 minutes and to give you a scientific approach to writing these and responding to these essays. Key will be that you practice these essay questions under time. You must do that, and you must do that repeatedly. You must be consistent in time practice of essay questions. Okay, so let's dive into this question, and then I'll model the approach that I'm going to be recommending for you. And of course, at the end of the day, you have to do what works for you. All right, so in this question, we look at the heart of the question. We're given data around population in 2021 for 3 countries, and then the projected growth in 2100. And we're asked here, so this is our key question. We're asked to evaluate, that's our command term, the possible consequences that could cause a rightward shift in the country's production possibility frontier. So we know we're looking at the ability to produce more of both capital and consumer goods, for example. And then the other command term, command in the question is that we must include at least one relevant diagram in our answer. So we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we've answered, we've responded to those requirements. All right, so for the 20 marker, what I'm going to recommend is that you follow this particular pattern of 2 points and a judgment. So you're going to make point 1, you're going to evaluate, and then point 2, you're going to evaluate, and then judgment. And when we're making the points, I'm going to suggest that you signpost. We don't need an introduction, so we're not going to faff about it. We're going to go directly into the response to the question. All right, so I'm going to model how I think we can respond to the first one. So there's a lot of signposts in here. So I would argue that our KAA paragraph, knowledge, application, analysis is going to be structured in this particular way. That we're going to do firstly, identify make a thesis statement as to what we believe is a possible factor that could shift the PPF curve rightward. Then incorporate some data from the stem of the question or some real world knowledge that we have available to us. And then we can integrate. So notice the word that I use, integrate a diagram into our analysis, into the development of the main point. And then now we have a link back sentence. So the link back sentence disciplines us to have focused development when we're doing our analysis. So one of the dangers when we write essays is that we can often drift. We can often go on a rabbit trail that takes us away from the central question in front of us. So we want to discipline our writing so that we focus on the thing that is being required of us, being asked of us. So if we go through this response, we're told the following. I'm writing the following. Firstly, one key factor that can cause a rightward shift of a country's production possibility frontier is an increase in the size of the labor force. So we know that the production possibility frontier, it depends upon the quantity of the factors of production that we apply. So whether it be land, labor, capital, or enterprise. So what I'm doing here, I'm piggybacking on the data that we're being provided with, and we're talking about the amount of labor, the size of the labor force, and the likelihood of the labor force to grow over time. So, for example, the data shows that the population of Philippines is predicted to rise from 113.9 million in 2021 to 180.2 million by 2100, while Bolivia's population will increase from 12.1 million to 18.8 million over the same period of review. So what does this mean? So we're now going to go into the chains of analysis, which will be important. So the examiner wants you to make more than 2 chains of analysis. And by chains of analysis, what we mean, you identify a cause and then the consequence of that cause. All right. So here, this means that a larger population increases the potential size of the labor force, assuming a proportion of the population is of working age. So our chain is that, our cause is that increase in population size will lead to the consequence, larger labor force. And the assumption, of course, is that when we increase the population size, some of those who are in the additional population will be of working age. They are employable. All right. So next, with more labor available, firms are able to produce more output across the economy. So we increase the population size leads to an increase in the labor force. All right. An increase in the labor force will lead to an increase in production. And an increase in production. So on the PPF will lead to a rightward shift in the PPF. So on the PPF diagram below, this is shown by an outward shift of the curve, indicating that the economy can now produce more consumer goods and more capital goods than before using its expanded resources. So an increase in the PPF means that there's an increase in consumer goods and an increase in capital goods. So here you can see, of course, that in the Marx scheme, I lifted the diagram from the Marx scheme. The Marx scheme spelled consumer goods incorrectly. All right. So that gives us our chain of analysis, and it's more than 2 stages. We have a diagram that we have linked in to the development of our chain of analysis, and this is what the examiner is looking for. The examiner is looking for us to talk about the diagram and not just to like attach the diagram to the essay without making any reference to it. The diagram does not speak for itself. You have to speak for the diagram. And then our link back statement, our conclusion that links back the development to the point that we made our thesis statement. So therefore, population growth can shift the PPF rightwards by increasing the quantity of labor available for production. So we identify our point, we apply the point in context, we develop the point, and we show how the point relates to we show how the development relates to the point that we made at the top. So now, what I would recommend is that we evaluate as we go along. So our next paragraph will be about evaluating the first point. So it should look something like this. So, however, population growth does not automatically lead to higher productive potential. So notice here in the evaluation, straight away identify a sentence that gives condition to the point that we raised earlier. So it critically evaluates the point that we raised earlier. And now we give an example. So, for example, if the increase in population is not matched by sufficient job creation or investment in skills, unemployment or underemployment may rise instead. So population growth on itself does not lead to an expansion in the PPF. It must be the case that the additional people who are in the economy are employable, and what that means is that they have skills that can be used in a productive context, and there are jobs that those skills can be applied to. So we have employable individuals who can find employment, and that's when population increase will translate into higher productive potential. So we explain that in the next part. This means that part. So this means that if additional workers are low skill or unable to find productive employment, the economy may not operate at its new potential. As a result, the outward shift of the PPF may be smaller than expected or may not occur at all in the short run. Furthermore, rapid population growth can place pressure on public services such as healthcare and education, reducing productivity elsewhere. So there's a danger that just growing the economy could actually lead to negative productivity gain. If the contribution of the additional people in the population takes away from output elsewhere in the economy, rather than overall adds to it. So concluding, therefore, population growth only causes a meaningful rightward shift of the PPF if the labor force is productively employed and sufficiently skilled. All right, point number 2. So one of the central arguments of economics is that more is better. With point number 2, so more land, more labor, more capital, more enterprise. So more is better. Point number 2 gives us the other insight that sometimes better is more. So better land, better labor, better machinery, better capital, better enterprise. And in order to get better, you have to research, you have to spend money on training and education for labor. You have to spend money on research and investment for capital in order to achieve or realize technological breakthroughs. So here, if the government now intervenes into the economy and say we're going to spend money on developing better machinery, spend money on developing and training, upskilling our labor force, then that can also move the PPF forward. So we're looking at state-led supply side intervention into the economy that will improve the quality of workers, that will improve the quality of machinery, technology available in the economy, and that will shift the PPF rightward. So our second point, I noticed the signposting. Secondly, increased investment in capital goods and human capital can cause a rightward shift of the production possibility frontier. For example, governments may increase spending on education and training or provide subsidies and tax breaks to encourage firms to invest in machinery, technology, and research and development. And now we do our analysis, our change of analysis. So this means that investment in physical capital raises labor productivity, allowing workers to produce more output per unit of time. Similarly, improved education and healthcare increases human capital by making workers more skilled, healthier, and more efficient. So we have government intervention causing improvement in labor productivity and improvement in the quality of capital. And this improvement in labor productivity means that workers are able to produce more with the per unit of time, per unit of resource, and consequently the PPF will shift outward. All right. And in the long run, it means that the economy will run more efficiently and there will be greater innovation. All right, so concluding, therefore, sustained investment in capital goods and human capital leads to a rightward shift of the PPF by increasing productivity across the economy. So we're looking at labor productivity and capital productivity. Our evaluation. However, and again, notice the consistency of our signposting. So however is our transition word into evaluation. However, the effectiveness of such investment depends on how well resources are allocated. So now we're criticizing or critiquing the effectiveness of government intervention in the economy, i.e., does the government know what it is doing? Is it targeting its spending in an appropriate way? And is there sufficient amount of spending? Is the spending sustainable? All of these questions that must be brought to bear, all right, for consideration. So, for example, spending on education may be directed towards subjects or courses with low labor market demand. So the government might be spending on developing skills that are no longer required or not sufficiently required by the market. Or it may be spending on research and development projects that may fail to generate usable technology. So spending money that is going nowhere on technology that is going nowhere. This means that opportunity costs may arise as government funds used for ineffective investment could have been spent elsewhere, such as infrastructure or healthcare. So you would see that coming. So you would talk about the opportunity cost of government spending. In addition, time lags may mean that the benefits of education and training may take many years to materialize, delaying any outward shift of the PPF. So what we're arguing here is that in the short run, we might not see the expansion of the PPF as desired. It will take a good number of years before government spending materializes and impacts the economy. So poor policy design can therefore limit the size of productivity gains. Therefore, investment only shifts the PPF significantly if it is what? These are the conditions that we're not identifying, the limitations. If it is well targeted, if it is efficient, and if it is sustained over time. All right, so for the final bit now, this part, so for a 20 marker, you must have a judgment. And we want to be thinking about, again, a scientific approach to writing the judgment. So here, I would argue, so there are different ways in which your teacher can explain the writing of a judgment. So I'm going to present this approach for writing a judgment. I call it the DJCLL approach. It's a bit long-winded, but hopefully it will give you a scientific approach to writing a judgment. And the goal will be that you want to be able to do a judgment in 5 or 6 minutes. So I would say 6 to 8 sentences for your judgment. If you spend more time than this, you run the risk of running out of time elsewhere in the exam. So no more than 8 sentences, I would say, no longer than 6 minutes. So understand now that what is a judgment? A judgment is a justified decision about which factor matters most and under clearly stated conditions. So it must be clear in your mind that a judgment is not a summary. So this is why I would prefer that you don't start off with in conclusion, because therefore that primes you to be writing a summary rather than providing what they would call a supported conclusion. All right. So the D stands for decision. You absolutely must make a decision. You must identify what you believe is most important. You must answer the question ultimately, which factor, policy, or effect matters the most. All right, so I would argue that you could start it off with on balance. So what is our decision? On balance, investment in capital goods and human capital is more important than population growth in causing a rightward shift of the PPF. So I believe that better is more. It is better to have quality inputs rather than have a lot of input. So it's better to have quality capital goods, quality human capital, quality workers, quality land, quality enterprise, and that would be more instrumental in shifting the PPF rightward than just having more capital and more labor. All right, so first sentence therefore is to state the decision. The second couple sentences would be to justify decision. Why is this better than the alternative already discussed? What's the alternative already discussed? The alternative is that we should have more labor. So this is because investment in education, training, and technology directly increases labor productivity. So this is the key. That when we invest in capital and labor, we're increasing productivity, allowing the economy to produce more output with the existing resources, leading to a clearer outward shift of the PPF. Population growth alone only increases potential labor supply and does not raise productive capacity unless workers are skilled and employed. So this is the key. That population growth only leads to an increase in the potential labor supply So what we're looking for, if we increase the skill set, there's a clear argument for an increase in productive potential. What are the conditions? So the next bit is, for the C is the conditions. When does this hold true? Where does it break down? Things to consider would be talk about price elasticity of demand or price elasticity of supply. Talk about the time period, which would be a short run or a long run. Talk about the stage of the country development. Talk about, if it's more it's underdeveloped, developing, developed. Talk about governance, the ability of the policymakers in government to identify appropriate policies, to customize those policies to context, and then to sustain those policies over time. And then they can talk about market structure, monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, etc. So here, so with the conditions now, we're providing illustration in order to identify where if we change the context, the conclusion will change. So, for example, in countries experiencing rapid population growth, such as Philippines, the impact on the PPF depends upon whether governments invest sufficiently in education and job creation. So we're saying it's all about whether or not the government is putting sufficient funding in place for upskilling of workers, and whether those newly skilled workers are able to find productive employment. Without this, the economy may operate inside its PPF due to unemployment or low productivity. So the next aspect now is L for limits. What realistically constrains the impact? So we're thinking about time lag, we're thinking about feasibility, we're thinking about unintended consequences, we're relaxing ceteris paribus. However, investment may take time to have an effect and can be inefficient if poorly targeted, reducing the size of the PPF shift in the short run. And then finally, link back. How does what we have said answer the question? So therefore, while population growth can contribute to economic capacity, sustained and well-targeted investment in human and physical capital is the most reliable factor in shifting PPF rightwards. So, so in videos that I'll be putting together, this is what I will be practicing for the judgment. And so I would encourage you to decide scientifically on an approach that you want to follow for constructing your stage of analysis here, the KAA part of your essay, and then of course have a clear method in your mind for the judgment. And this, I would argue, will answer the specifications and the feedback of the examiner and the specification from Mark scheme as to what is required. So we will look at in future videos at further illustrating this approach. All right. See you soon.